Krauss. I'm the director of the film. You all know Richard Lawrence. This is my brother Luke. He's the producer and the director of photography.
Well, we're going to have a Q&A. So, and by the way, we thought we'd also, especially since there were some problems before, we'd hang around a little bit after the Q&A, and maybe if people have books or something, we'll try and do some signs. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. Are there microphones? A roving microphone? So should I? Do you want me, Gus? Do you want me to take it? Okay. Is that okay with you, Richard?
Yes. Just ask for more light. I feel like
I can. Can these be turned up at all, or no? We can't really see. Oh, you're at the mic. Okay. Why don't we start with you? But the mic isn't working. Oh, there you go.
Hello?
Okay.
I was wondering about the end of the movie with Bill Pullman at the end. They're questioning the entire debate between atheists and theists. What was the putting that there?
Well,
You want to tell the truth, or?
well, we thought about that for a long time. Actually, Richard was understandably concerned that maybe it wasn't the best thing to leave it on a questionable note. But I think we all kind of talked about it and decided that it's okay to leave it with an open question. Is it okay to talk about these things and bang our head against the wall, or is it productive or not? I think it's just
I really felt it was really important. I argued pretty strongly to put that one in there. It was originally switched around, but I think it's exactly that way. I mean, one of the purposes of doing the movie was not to preach, but to get a discussion going. And I think we often feel that way. I don't know if you do. Sometimes you wonder if you're just banging your head against a wall, and it's the question we all ask. And so it seemed a good way to leave that question an open question and get people to think about it. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, my question was not whether we should have ended like that, but whether we should have ended with whether the cameo parts by all the stars should have been interspersed with the film, rather than put on at the end.
And then I think Gus and Luke tried that, but it didn't work.
We had an early edit where we had the celebrity people throughout the whole film, but I think we kind of decided early on that it just took away from this kind of rock and roll tour film road movie that we were trying to do. And it was just better to kind of bookend the film with it and let the story be about this kind of capturing the moment that's happening right now in your guys' lives.
Okay, well, we'll probably get back to that rock and roll tour thing, because I'm sure we're, yeah?
Hi, Richard. It's Brian Partridge. I haven't seen you in 30 years since you were my doctoral supervisor. Nancy and I wanted to welcome you to San Diego and to thank you for everything you've done in the name of science. We really applaud your courage and your bloody-mindedness.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any former students in my colleague. Yes?
Hi there. I'm Connor Nelson, president of the SSA at UCSD, and I was just wondering what we could do as a group that would best help to further the secular cause.
You want to start?
Encourage people to ask questions. Don't tell people what to think. Try to encourage people to think. Teach children how to think, but don't tell them what to think. We've had centuries, millennia of children being told what to think, and the time has come to instead get people to ask questions, get children to ask questions, and to think for themselves.
Let me add, the other thing I'd say, I think, is that to portray yourself as a positive, excited movement. I mean, what you're really, at least I think what we're all excited about, I know Richard and I are, and I think it's talked about in the movie, is we're excited about the real world. We're not negative, we're not opposed to things. We want to get people excited about the world that actually exists, not the one they've invented in their minds. And so I think if you can really work hard to show that that it's not that you're against things so much. You're maybe against nonsense, but you're pro thinking and pro being excited about reality. So I'd say do that to portray yourself then. You know, it's okay. Yeah.
Some people think that religion is ineradicable, either because humans are genetically predisposed to religious belief, or that religious belief is a meme that is just too successful to eradicate. Do you think either of these are possible? And if not, what would you say to someone who does?
Well, it's clearly not ineradicable because it's been eradicated in, I would hope, most people here, and certainly everybody on the platform. It may be difficult to eradicate, but the answer to that is education. As I said before, people to think for ourselves, but it's a gospel of despair to say it's ineradicable, and it's actually obviously false.
Well, and Richard, didn't you, I mean, in England, I think for the first time, in the sense, I mean, the point is a number of people, at least in the first world, in the developed world, that are claiming they have religious affiliation has been monotonically going down. You could, if you wanted to, predict a date when it might be zero, but it's certainly been monotonically going down. I thought in England was the first time, this last census, the first time the majority of people or something said that they had no religious affiliation or something like that?
Well, yes, that's complicated because in Britain we have a census every 10 years. And in 2011, the census showed that something like 54% of people claimed to be Christian. That had come down from, I think, 73% in the 2001 census. However, the British branch of my foundation conducted a poll in the very week of the census because we didn't believe that the census would be properly reported. And we took those people who had ticked the Christian box in the official census, and we took a sample of them, a proper sample, and we asked them supplementary questions. You ticked the Christian box, right? What do you actually believe? Do you believe Jesus is your Lord and Savior? Do you believe that Jesus was born of a virgin? Do you believe that Jesus was resurrected? When all those subsequent questions show that these people who tick the Christian box, actually they're not Christian at all. So we asked them, why did you tick the Christian box? And the most popular answer to that was, oh, well, I like to think of myself as a good person. That's what we're up against. That's what we're up against. But we also asked the question, given that you like to think of yourself as a good person, when you have a moral dilemma to face, do you turn to your religion in order to solve that moral dilemma? And once again, no. Only, I think, 10% said they turned to their religion. The majority of people did what we all do, which is turn to friends, turn to that sort of sense of morality, which we all have anyway. So that suggests that although the official census said that I think it was 54% of the British people are Christian, the real figure is far, far lower than that. And my bet is that the same would be true in America as well, if people answered poll questions honestly.
Yeah, they tend to, I think I said in the film, they tend to pick and choose what they like, most people, and don't take the whole doctrine. But I think at the same time we have to recognize that not only are we working against the notion, it's sociological, I think, as much as biological, that being an atheist makes you a bad person, or at least not being religious makes you a bad person. And that puts a lot of pressure on people to at least make the statement that they're religious. But also, I think we have to say that organized religions have provided a variety of things that are useful, that have been useful not only to maintain their own power, but sociologically, sense of community, all these other things. And the key, and so people say, why do you want to get rid of religion? It does that. And to me, the important point is that, well, those are useful things, but we don't need religion to do that. I always think we each have a rock concert every Sunday instead of a church service. We'd still have the same sense of community, fun, and more drugs. But I think that I was going to. That joke made me forget what I was going to say next.
Hi, I was just wondering, in your opinion, could you give me a definition of agnostic versus atheist?
These are words which are used in different ways by different people. I think it was T.H. Huxley, I know it was T.H. Huxley, coined the word agnostic. And he meant it in a rather positive way. It was an open-minded scientific approach, curious, waiting for evidence, that kind of thing. And I think we're all of us agnostic in that sort of sense. Other people use it to mean you're not absolutely sure. And again, we're all agnostic in that sense. We're all agnostic about whether there are fairies and leprechauns and things like that. Other people use the word agnostic to mean you think that because you can't be sure, it's exactly 50-50. It's like tossing a coin. There might be a God, there might not be a God. And that I don't think is a very fruitful use of the word agnostic, because that actually is actively misleading. You can say, I can't be sure one way or the other, but I still don't think that it's exactly 50-50. I think there's a probability weighting one way or the other. I, in the God delusion, introduced, I think it was a 7-point scale between people who are totally sure there is a God on the one end. They were the ones, I think, and the 7s were people who are totally sure that there isn't. I think I called myself a 6.9, because you can't be absolutely sure of any negative. But very few people, I think, are exactly 50-50. If you're anything like a 6, that means that you can't be absolutely sure that there's no God, but you think it's no more likely than that there's a tooth fairy, and you live your life on the assumption that you better get on with your life and not mess around with superfluous possibilities like supernatural beings. So I think a de facto atheist would be somebody who lives their life as though there is no supernatural being, and that's what I certainly am.
And I think, to add to that, I mean, in science, the key point is that it's always, we don't, there's no certainty of truth, absolutely. There's certainly a falsehood. Things you can demonstrate that work against the experiment are just wrong. But otherwise, it's a scale. It's something that's very likely or very unlikely, and we quantify that, especially in physics. We can quantify our uncertainty. And so in that sense, I agree with Richard, that there's no scientist who should say, as a scientist, that it's 100% certain that there's no God, because it's in some sense, it's not a falsifiable proposition. But you can say it's highly unlikely, and Bertrand Russell gave the example of a teapot orbiting Jupiter, I think. But that I can't prove there's not a nice kind of teapot orbiting Jupiter. But there's no reason to suspect it's there. It's highly unlikely it's there, and therefore I can assume, unless proven otherwise, that it isn't there. And I think the other thing that's very important is that when you say it's living your life assume as if there is no God, most people do that in their everyday activities, and all scientists do it, regardless of their religious affiliation. When they get, that famous biologist said, when I go in the laboratory, I forget who it is, Dan Haldane, I think, said, when I go in the laboratory, I'm an atheist. I'm not assuming there's someone twiddling the knobs to make the experiment be what I want it to be. So if I'm an atheist in the lab, why shouldn't I be outside the lab?
Could I just plug an excellent YouTube video on this? Jacqueline Glenn did a lovely YouTube on that matter of atheist and agnostic. I recommend it.
Over here?
Thank you, Dr. Krauss.
You're welcome.
Hello, reasonists. I did not turn this card in because I think it is already a prize worth a great pearl to be in the same building with Professor Dawkins and Professor Krauss and the several founders here. Being a selfish objectivist like I am, I'm going to ask 2 questions if you don't mind. First off, I'd like to know what new discoveries in the magisterium of evolutionary biology can you share with us? And number 2, I'd like your opinions about the somewhat metaphysical seeming musings and ideas of Sam Harris.
I thought you were going to ask me about physics, darn it. You start.
I think that biology is evolutionary biology is in a very exciting phase at the moment.
There we go.
I think evolutionary biology is in a very exciting phase because really of molecular genetics. This is something which Darwin couldn't possibly have dreamed of. The idea that in every living creature, in every cell of every living creature, there is a digital instruction book written in the same digital code in every creature, in every cell, which means that whereas Darwin could only use comparative anatomy and comparative physiology as a way of inferring relationships between living creatures, we now have a massive digital dictionary, a digital encyclopedia inside every living cell, which means that you can compare any creature with any other creature, and in principle work out with great certainty, eventually this will be done, it's still a lot of problems to be ironed out, work out exactly the tree of life, the tree of cousinship by which individuals are related to each other. This is a very, very fast-moving field, and I think it's a very exciting field for a young person to get into today. I would add, I think that physics is also a very exciting field for a young person to get into, not least because of the new results which are coming out.
I'll answer a little bit, obviously, and then maybe we'll mention Sam, I don't know. But it is a very exciting time. My mother wanted me to become a doctor when I was young, and she made the mistake of telling me doctors were scientists, so I got interested in science. Anyway, and then but when I dropped biology in high school because when I was doing biology, it was memorizing parts of the frog, memorizing parts of the leaf, memorizing this or that, and I didn't like to memorize them. And it's a very different world now, and I think if I have to say, there's no doubt in my mind that the field that I think is evolving most quickly, that's not a pun, is biology in general. And evolution is a central part of biology. So it's an incredibly exciting time. Happily, it is an exciting time in physics right now. In the last few weeks in particular, I'm very excited about it. And what I thought when we got to metaphysical, you were going to say, what I like is the fact that we've turned in the last few weeks a lot of metaphysics, or people would claim what was some of what my book might have been when in metaphysics, it's now science, because we can see it. And so it's really, anytime you can turn metaphysics into science, it's a good thing. And speaking of metaphysics, you did ask the question. Sam is a friend of both of ours, and is a wonderful writer and speaker. I think in certain areas I have to disagree with him, and particularly related to Buddhism and that kind of aspect. I think I don't see much difference between that and the other religions. But that's just, that's a personal thing. Do you want to say anything else? Or?
Well, I think that Sam is interested in meditation as a physiological technique. I don't think he believes in any of the religious stuff about Buddhism at all.
We've had a few discussions. but he is primarily interested from the neurophysiological use of meditation. Yes?
Hey, thanks for coming. I think one of the things that is best about science is that it's constantly providing new information and new challenges to face and asking new questions. And in light of the tour that you guys do and your history with engaging with people who don't have that same worldview, do you ever see new arguments? Because I feel like I see the same arguments. When I first started to get involved in the secular community, it took like 15 minutes to see every argument they had. I don't know if you've ever, in your travels, have seen any new or interesting arguments that you had to challenge.
No.
And it was frustrating. I know we both had this experience. It's frustrating. Not only the arguments not new, but even when you counter them, it's like they're just repeated to you again and again in the same stage, the same time, the same argument. And I tend to think that there's some of, that's the other thing. Now I remember what I was going to say about religion. My wife and I were just talking earlier about when you're a kid, you like to have things, you like to read the same book over and over again. It gives you a sense of security. And at some point, you're supposed to grow out of that. But I think there's no doubt that familiarity breeds security. And I think it's a sign of how insecure religious people are truly in their beliefs, is that they have to go to church every Sunday and repeat them. I mean, we don't do quantum mechanics every Sunday and say, let's repeat it. Because now we'll keep believing. Because we don't repeat it every Sunday, we might stop believing it. So I think that repetition is really good. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Krauss and Mr. Dawkins. Sorry, but people have called you guys militant atheists, and even Colbert accused you of attacking his God. And I want to know if you consider yourself as militant atheists or as educators or something else.
Well, Richard is not militant. I can tell you that. Okay, Richard has this, many people think Richard is strident and militant. And I can say, not only is he not, and not only am I not, but what amazed me is how I could sympathize with that much more than I used to when we first met. After my last book came out, where I just asked the question, could we make the universe without God? How much do we know? Is it possible? And just asking the question immediately put me in the same camp. I became a militant, strident atheist just for asking questions. And so I think that word is used for some reason. Asking a question when it comes to God makes you militant, and it's offensive, it's wrong, and it's not true. And Richard gets a bad rap, in my opinion.
It is true that when the Archbishop of Canterbury is introduced, he's never introduced as militant, strident Archbishop of Canterbury. There's a kind of asymmetry in the use of these words.
Yeah, in fact, if you're a fervent believer, you're fervent, right?
Yeah.
You're strong. It reminds me of when I was, I grew up in Canada, and it talked about the difference between football and baseball. The words, tackle versus go home. And it's that way. Every adjective that's used to apply to believers is a positive one, and every adjective that's used to apply to even not just non-believers, but people who question, is a negative one, and it's something we have to try and overcome.
But I think it is true that our whole civilization has got it so used to religion getting a free ride that you just don't criticize it. That when you offer even a mild criticism of religion, people genuinely hear it as militant and strident because they're so unaccustomed to it. We're quite accustomed to political argument being quite strong, and we don't use words like militant and strident. But it's because we've all got so used to the idea that you just don't criticize religion. It's sort of impolite. If you criticize or even question, as Lawrence says, even question somebody's religion, it's as though you said they've got an ugly face or something of that sort. Identify with it personally. So it sounds worse than it actually is.
I think that the key point here, and I'm worried about it in this country, is not just religion. Various other things are becoming more and more, or less and less subject to questioning. And I think what you said at the very beginning is, if I could give a message, it's not a message about God or science, it's a message to just question and don't be intimidated from questioning. And that has to do with everything from religion to the Tea Party.
Thank you.
You want that? Louder or up? Okay. Okay, you got
Okay,
to.
well, we're close.
Yeah.
I was going to say the interesting and really humbling thing with being on the road with you guys is how much time you spend answering the same questions and taking the time, to be delicate with people in the audience, but you still view it as strident, even though you're the one being questioned.
There was a scene, I don't know if it was in the original version of the movie, but there was that when we were in Canberra and that girl started crying.
Yeah.
And it was a long scene. It couldn't get in the movie, but and we got her to come back and the audience and talk to her.
Yeah. It's actually the number one question I get asked when doing press for the film. What's it like to be on the road with Richard Dawkins? Is he that angry all the time? I think you need to watch the movie. I mean, he's what I can say sitting next to Richard is that he's like the most anything but angry. He's the most passionate, enthusiastic, positive person that I've ever met around.
I know.
I mean, one of the stories I tell people, which again, this will hopefully be on the DVD or the extras on iTunes or whatever when this stuff comes out, is one of my favorite things on the bonus features, which Richard hasn't been lucky enough to see yet, is we captured some of Richard's audio checks backstage at some of these events when Richard was he would deliver poetry each night. And so now he probably doesn't know this, but the crew, we used to look forward to that quite a bit, actually. Which poem is Richard going to do tonight?
I have no idea you did that.
I think that's on there. I don't know how much longer we're supposed to go. Maybe someone like that.
I'll make this quick for you. Many philosophers are charging the new atheist movement of being scientistic, notably the atheist philosopher Massimo Pigliucci. And I was wondering if we should recalibrate or take scientism as a badge of honor.
Well, I was recently in a quote. I mean, he's written about me a lot because I said some mean things about philosophers. Right? True, but mean. And then we were in a rather pleasant session, Dan Demmett and he and I in Belgium. And I think this scientism thing it amazes me because no one talks about religionism, which I think is even more strident. I mean, scientism. The question it's an invented word, and I think in some sense, yeah, a badge of honor. Are you saying no scientist is saying, or no one that we know, I think, is saying there's not other aspects of human life that aren't enjoyable, or that humans should be scientists every day, or that the love or music or any other things that make life so wonderful are irrelevant. But maybe I'm a heathen for saying it, but I just don't think there's any form of knowledge except empirical knowledge. I don't think revelation, whenever you have revelation, it's wrong, in my opinion. And I'm always saying.
Well, I suppose we could argue about whether science has anything to say about morality. And so you could be accused of scientism if you thought that science was able to tell you what's right and wrong. Sam Harris comes close to saying that, and it's a very, very interesting book that he's written on that subject. But I think I agree with Lawrence that truths about the real world are scientific truths, and of course that doesn't mean for a moment that we don't love poetry, we love music, we love art, we love beautiful sunsets and things of that sort. We're sometimes accused of being soulless, passionless, cold-blooded scientists with no emotion. We never fall in love. We never weep over poetry. I've actually just contributed to an anthology of poetry called Poems That Made Grown Men Cry. And I was delighted to contribute a poem by A.E. Hausmann, Tell Me Not Here, Please Not Say What Tune the Enchantress Plays, in aftermaths of soft September, or under blanching Mays. For she and I were long acquainted, and I knew all her ways. A scientist can love poetry as much as anybody else, but when it comes to truths about the real world, as Lawrence says, empirical evidence is it.
And I think, people are afraid, but it's going to. Science may not be able to necessarily say right and wrong, but I would argue that you don't even know what right and wrong is unless you know the consequences of your actions, and you require science to know the consequences of your actions. You can't even make moral decisions in some sense without empirical knowledge. And science may eventually understand why we think things are right and wrong. But will that diminish us? I don't think so. I wrote a book about Richard Feynman, who was a great hero of mine and a lot of scientists. And he made it. He's not the first person to say this, perhaps, but knowing how a rainbow works doesn't make it less beautiful, it makes it more beautiful. And I think, so science doesn't take away that spiritual component, it enhances it. And as I said, I think, no, I guess not this, it said in Bill Maher once, that the great virtue of the spirituality of science, unlike the spirituality of religion, is it's true.
Good evening, my name is Dr. Krauss. I've been trained in metaphysics to continue my learning in that area. Dr. Krauss, we actually had DG with us.
Yeah.
And I want to applaud everyone who worked on this film. I think it's kind of a watershed and be good for people to cling to. So great work. I have a question. It's not well formulated, so please forgive it. It could actually branch from the Christian box that's been attacked, who loves to be a good person. And the question is based on my readings of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations and Stoicism as a philosophy. you can be a good person by perhaps following Stoic principles. But Marcus Aurelius followed those principles and he was a pagan.